Found out my parents paid $228,000 toward my sister's mortgage while telling me they couldn't help with my son's surgery bills. I didn't call. I just returned every picture frame they were in and left them stacked on their porch. My name is Reed. I'm 34. I'm a warehouse supervisor. My son Caleb is 4. His scar is shaped like a question mark, which is a coincidence his surgeon didn't plan and which I can't stop noticing because the question the scar asks is the one my family never answered. Before the frames, there was the hospital. Caleb was diagnosed at 18 months. Craniosynostosis, the premature fusion of skull plates. Without surgery, the skull can't expand to accommodate brain growth, which is a sentence I've typed into search bars at 2 a.m. more times than I've told anyone. And the search results are clinical and terrifying and written for people who aren't holding the baby the results are about. The surgery, cranial vault remodeling. A team of surgeons opening the skull, reshaping the bone, repositioning the plates so the brain has room to become what it's supposed to become. You hand your child to a nurse. The nurse walks through a door. The door closes. You sit in a waiting room for 6 hours. I sat in that waiting room alone. Plastic chair. The kind with the metal legs that leave marks on tile floors. The room smelled like disinfectant and the specific recycled air of a hospital that cleans itself constantly and still can't get ahead of the smell. A television was mounted to the wall, playing a home renovation show with the sound off, and a family on the screen was choosing kitchen countertops, marble or quartz, and they were debating edge profiles while my son was having his skull reshaped in a room I couldn't enter, and the distance between choosing marble and choosing whether your toddler's brain has room to grow is a kind of absurdity that doesn't make you laugh. It makes you sit very still and forget to drink the coffee someone left on the side table that you don't remember anyone bringing. Ray, my wife, was with Caleb in pre-op. Arthur and Gail, my parents, said they'd try to come. They didn't. Nina, my sister, didn't come either. 6 hours. 1 chair. 1 television. 1 family choosing countertops while another family waited for a skull. Before I tell you what Arthur and Gail did with $228,000, I need to tell you what Arthur did at 3:14 a.m. on the night Caleb was born. Because without this, Arthur is just a man who funded a house and not a surgery, and men who fund houses are easy to judge and hard to grieve, and I'm doing both. When Caleb was born, Arthur drove 90 minutes at 2 a.m. to be at the hospital. He was the first family member there. He held Caleb in the NICU, 6 pounds 4 ounces, a baby so small that Arthur's hands looked like they belonged to a different species, and he cried. I watched my father cry for the first time. The room smelled like hand sanitizer and warming blankets, and the specific newness of a person who has existed for less than an hour. Arthur said, to the baby, not to me, I'm going to take care of you. 7 words. To a newborn who couldn't hold his own head up. I heard them. The nurses heard them. The promise was made at 3:14 a.m., and it hung in the room like something permanent. The Arthur at the NICU is the Arthur I keep searching for in the Arthur who paid $228,000 for a house and $0 for the boy he held. Those 2 Arthurs don't fit in the same frame, but they're in several. The surgery bill, $47,000. Insurance covered 60%. Remaining, $18,800. I set up a payment plan, $340 a month for 5 years. The auto draft hits my account on the 15th. I've been paying for 26 months. $8,840 paid. $9,960 remaining. The 15th doesn't care about frames or porches or promises made at 3:14 a.m. The 15th just takes the money. Caleb's scar runs from behind his left ear, over the top of his head, to behind his right ear. It's hidden by his hair most days. Visible when he gets a haircut. Shaped, roughly, like a question mark. The surgeon didn't design it that way. Scars don't follow designs. But the question mark is there, and every time I see it, which is every bath and every haircut, and every time the wind pushes his hair the wrong direction, the question it asks is the one I asked my mother on a phone call 3 weeks after the surgery, which was, can you help? Frame 1. The wedding photo. Living room shelf. Ray and I at the courthouse. 2018. No venue. No reception. No parental contribution. We paid for the wedding ourselves. $8,200 for a courthouse ceremony, a dinner at an Italian restaurant with 14 guests, and a photographer who was also a cousin and gave us a discount. Arthur and Gail gave Nina $12,000 for her wedding 2 years earlier. A venue. A caterer. Flowers. I found this out from Vanessa at a family barbecue. The same barbecue where I found out about the $228,000. Because Vanessa is the family's accidental auditor and barbecues are where audits happen. I took the wedding photo off the shelf. Put it in the box. The shelf had a dust outline where the frame sat. A clean rectangle surrounded by the thin film of a house where a toddler recovers from surgery and both parents work and nobody dusts the shelves because dusting requires time that doesn't exist between shifts and payment plans and PT appointments. Frame 2. Arthur's retirement party. Kitchen wall. Arthur at 62, holding a cake, surrounded by coworkers. I drove 3 hours to attend. Nina didn't go. I was the only child there. Arthur hugged me in the parking lot after and said, "Thanks for coming." Not, "Thanks for being here." "Thanks for coming." As if attendance was a favor, not a given. The photo hung in my kitchen for 4 years. I made Caleb's bottles under it. I washed surgery bandages in the sink below it. Arthur's smiling face watched me pay for things he didn't fund in a kitchen he didn't visit. I took it off the wall. The hook was slightly bent. I didn't straighten it. Frame 3. Gail's birthday. Hallway. Gail at 58. Blowing out candles. The photo was taken by Ray, who noticed that nobody else was taking pictures and picked up her phone because Ray notices gaps and fills them, which is what Ray does in every room she enters. She finds the thing nobody is doing and does it. Gail is smiling in the photo. The candles are mid-blow. Behind her, Arthur is looking at his phone. Gail taught Caleb to wave. I need you to know this because the frame isn't just glass and wood. Caleb was 10 months old. Gail sat on our living room floor, which she doesn't normally do because Gail has bad knees and the floor requires effort she usually declines. She sat there for 14 minutes waving at Caleb until he waved back. The first wave was a fist opening and closing. Gail cheered like he'd won something. 14 minutes on a floor that hurt her knees to teach a grandson to wave. That Gail, the floor Gail, is the same Gail who said things are tight while sending $3,200 a month to Nina's mortgage. Both Gails are real. The frame held the one I loved. The porch received both. Frame 4. Nina's baby shower. Bedroom wall. I'm in this photo, standing behind Nina, who is holding a onesie. I drove 90 minutes to the shower. Brought a gift. $85 car seat cover. Ray picked it out. Nina thanked me in the specific way people thank you when they're already opening the next gift, warmly but briefly, the way you acknowledge something that was expected. Nina's house. I need to tell you about Nina's house because the house is where the money went. For bedrooms. 2.5 bathrooms. 2-car garage. Backyard with a deck Arthur built last summer. 3 weekends of work, which I found out from Nina's Instagram because Arthur told me his back was too bad for projects when I asked him to help install a wheelchair ramp for Caleb's physical therapy access. A ramp. For $100 in materials. Arthur's back was bad for a ramp and fine for a deck. The ramp would have taken 4 hours. The deck took 3 weekends. The ramp was for a grandson. The deck was for a daughter. The back knows the difference. I took the frame off the wall. Put it in the box with the others. Frame 5. Family Christmas 2017. Mantle. The whole family. Before Caleb. Before the surgery. Before I knew about the money. Everyone is smiling the way families smile in Christmas photos, which is to say everyone is performing the version of themselves that fits in a frame, and frames are small, and the versions are edited, and nobody in the photo is the person I now know them to be. Frame 6. Arthur and Caleb at the park. Living room wall. Caleb at 14 months. Before the diagnosis. Arthur pushing him on a swing. Both laughing. Ray took this photo from a bench. She was eating a granola bar and crying because Caleb was laughing on a swing, and she didn't know yet that his skull plates were fusing and the laughter would soon share a timeline with surgical consultations. But in the photo, nobody knows anything except that the swing goes forward and back and the boy laughs each time. I stood in front of this frame longer than the others. Part of me wanted to leave it. Part of me wanted to take it down and throw it. And a small part of me, the part one don't talk about, wanted to call Arthur and ask him to come push the swing again. Because the Arthur in the photo is the Arthur I build a wall around. And the wall has 11 frames on it. And I'm taking them down one at a time, and the wall is getting lighter and colder, and I don't know if lighter and colder is what I want. I took it down. Placed it in the box carefully because the glass in this one has a crack in the corner from when it fell during Caleb's PT session, and I caught it, but not fast enough, and the crack runs diagonally across Arthur's shoulder, which is either damage or a metaphor, and today it's both. The call. I need to tell you about the call because the call is why the frames exist on a porch instead of on my walls. 3 weeks after the surgery, Caleb was home, head bandaged, sleeping 14 hours a day because toddlers whose skulls have been reshaped sleep like they're rebuilding from the inside, which they are, and you watch them sleep, and you check the bandages, and you hold the baby monitor even though you're in the room, because holding something electronic that tracks your child's breathing makes you feel like there's a system between the fear and the floor. The first bill arrived, $18,800 after insurance. I opened the envelope at the kitchen table. The number had a comma in it. Commas in medical bills are the punctuation of a country that charges you for keeping your child alive. I make $52,000 a year. After taxes and rent and the costs of 3 people in a 2-bedroom apartment, my disposable income is about $680 a month. The bill was 27.6 months of my disposable income. I sat at the table with the envelope and a cup of coffee that went cold while I did math that doesn't work on a salary that doesn't stretch. I called Gail, not Arthur. Gail. Because in this family, requests go through Gail the way water goes through plumbing, following the path that was laid before I was old enough to choose. I didn't ask for a gift. I asked for a loan. Help. The word help in my mouth felt heavy because I don't ask for help. Not because I don't need it, but because asking has never produced results in this family, and I'd stopped expecting the faucet to fix itself. We'd love to help, honey, but things are tight right now. Maybe next year. Things are tight. 6 words delivered in the tone Gail uses for everything uncomfortable, warm and apologetic and final, like closing a door with a smile painted on it. In the background, Arthur. Not speaking. Not getting on the phone. Watching television. The volume was audible, a sports broadcast, crowd noise and a commentator's voice rising on a play. Something happened on a field somewhere, and a crowd cheered while Gail told me they couldn't help pay for their grandson's skull surgery. A crowd cheered for a ball. Gail said, maybe next year for a skull. Arthur sat in a chair and watched the screen. I said, okay, I understand. The 2 most expensive words I've ever spoken. Not because they cost money. Because they gave Gail permission to hang up without cost. And hanging up without cost is what this family does to me. They exit and I absorb, and nobody notices the weight redistribution because the person carrying it doesn't mention it. I hung up. Sat on the kitchen floor. The tile was cold. Caleb was asleep in the next room, breathing through the baby monitor I was holding even though his room was 8 feet away because the monitor proved he was breathing and I needed proof of something that night. Ray found me. She was wearing the gray t-shirt with the paint stain from the nursery, and she sat on the floor next to me without asking what happened because she could see the bill on the table and the phone on the floor and her husband on the tile, and the math between those 3 objects was visible without words. The refrigerator hummed. Caleb slept. The bill sat on the table above us. I took extra shifts at the warehouse. Saturdays and Sundays. 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. 7 months. Loading pallets while Caleb healed and Ray covered the weekends alone with a recovering toddler, which she did without complaint for 7 months because Ray doesn't complain, Ray adjusts, and the adjustment was 28 weekends of solo parenting while I loaded boxes to pay for a surgery my parents called tight. The $340 auto draft started on the 15th of March. It's still drafting. 29 months remaining. The money leaves my account the way the answer left Gail's mouth, automatically, on schedule, without looking back. Frame 7, 8, 9. I'm going faster now because the removal got faster. Once you take down 3 or 4, the rest come off easier. The way decisions get easier after the hardest one, which was the swing photo, and everything after the swing photo was logistics. Frame 7. Gail holding baby Caleb. Guest bedroom. Frame 8. Arthur at a barbecue, laughing, wearing the apron I gave him for Father's Day. Hallway. Frame 9. Nina's college graduation. I drove 4 hours. Shelf in the office. The Discovery. 4th of July barbecue. Vanessa. Potato salad. Vanessa, my cousin, 28, who works as a dental hygienist and who provides family intelligence the way satellites provide weather data, accurately, constantly, and without understanding the consequences on the ground, was standing by the grill holding a paper plate with a scoop of potato salad she hadn't eaten yet, because Vanessa talks before she eats and eats after she said the thing she shouldn't have. She said, "Nina's house is gorgeous. Your parents practically bought it for her." I was holding a beer. I put it down on the folding table. The condensation left a ring on the plastic tablecloth. The tablecloth was red, white, and blue because it was the 4th of July and Vanessa's husband buys patriotic tablecloths in bulk from a warehouse store, and Vanessa says it's his one personality trait, which is mean and also accurate. I asked what she meant. Vanessa, who didn't know about the surgery bills and didn't know about things are tight, and didn't know about the kitchen floor or the 7 months of weekend shifts or the $340 auto draft on the 15th, explained. Arthur and Gail have been paying toward her mortgage for years. Like a lot. Didn't you know? I didn't know. I stood at the barbecue for about 40 more minutes. I ate a hot dog. I watched Caleb play with Vanessa's kids on a slip-and slide, his scar visible because his hair was wet, and the scar catches the light when his hair is flat, and nobody at the barbecue noticed it except me, because I always notice it because the scar is shaped like a question mark, and the question has been unanswered for 2 years, and the hot dog tasted like nothing, and the beer was warm, and I was standing at a party doing the thing I do in this family, which is standing and absorbing and not reacting and eating food that has no flavor because the flavor left when Vanessa said the number she was about to say. Monday. Kitchen table. Laptop. Caleb eating cereal next to me. Cheerios arranged in a line because 4-year-olds organize cereal into patterns that make sense to them even when nothing else does. The same table where I opened the $18,800 bill. The same kitchen where I sat on the floor. Different numbers on the screen. I pulled up the county assessor's website. Searched Nina's address. The mortgage payment history loaded in rows. Third-party payments. Monthly. Ranging from $2,800 to $3,400. Same routing number. Arthur and Gail's bank. 6 years of payments. I scrolled. The rows kept going. Year 1. Year 2. Year 3. Each row a month. Each month a payment. Each payment larger than my $340 surgery auto draft by a factor of 8. I sat there scrolling through 6 years of transfers while Caleb arranged Cheerios, and the kitchen smelled like the coffee I'd made and forgotten to drink, which is what happens to coffee when you're reading numbers that rewrite your childhood. The coffee just sits there getting cold while the past gets hot. Total, $228,000. The payments started 14 months before Caleb was born. 14 months. Arthur and Gail were sending $3,200 a month to Nina when Caleb arrived. When the diagnosis came. When the surgery happened. When the bills came. When things were tight. Things were tight because $3,200 a month was going to a 4-bedroom colonial with a deck Arthur built and a kitchen Nina renovated and a garage that fits 2 cars, and the tightness wasn't a condition. It was an allocation, and the allocation didn't include a grandson skull. They could have paused Nina's payments for 3 months. 3 months of $3,200 is $9,600. Caleb's surgery bill after insurance was $18,800. Even pausing for 2 months would have covered half. They didn't pause. They didn't redirect. They didn't tell me the money existed. They said things are tight from a household that was sending $3,200 a month to someone else's mortgage. And I said, okay, and sat on the floor and worked weekends for 7 months while my son healed without his father home. The family ledger, since we're counting, and I am counting because somebody should. Nina received $228,000, mortgage, $12,000, wedding, $18,400, car cosign at 22. Total, approximately $258,400. Reed received, $0. I paid my own wedding, $8,200, courthouse. Bought my own car, $6,800, used. Paid my son's surgery bills alone. And sent Gail $150 per month for 2 years for groceries, $3,600 total. During a period when Gail was sending Nina $3,200 per month. The son sending $150 was told, things are tight, by the mother sending $3,200 to the other child. The math doesn't need a speech. The math is the speech. Arthur built Nina a deck last summer. 3 weekends. Power tools. Lumber. I saw the photos on Nina's Instagram while sitting in the hospital parking lot during Caleb's 6-month post-op checkup. Arthur told me his back was too bad for projects when I asked him to help install a $400 wheelchair ramp for Caleb's physical therapy access. His back was bad for a ramp and fine for a deck. The ramp was for a grandson. The deck was for a daughter. Arthur's back is bilingual. It speaks fluent no to me and fluent yes to Nina, and the fluency is so practiced that I don't think he notices the accent anymore. I closed the laptop. Caleb was still lining up Cheerios. I watched him for a minute. His scar was visible because his hair was pushed to one side the way it falls when he sleeps. I stood up and went to the hallway and looked at the frames. Frame 10, Easter 2021. Living room. The whole family. Caleb post-surgery, scar hidden by a hat Ray bought specifically for the photo because the scar was still pink and raised, and Ray wanted one photo where the scar wasn't the first thing you saw, which is a kindness that costs $8 at Target and which nobody in the photo except Ray thought about. I took it down. The box was getting heavy. 11 frames is heavier than you'd think, not because glass and would weigh much, but because what's inside them weighs more than the materials. And carrying 11 photos of people who funded a house and not a surgery requires a strength that isn't physical. Frame 11. The Christmas photo. Hallway. I saved it for last. I knew I would the way you know which conversation you're avoiding. Not because you haven't thought about it, but because you've thought about it so much that approaching it feels like arriving at a destination you've been driving toward for miles. Christmas 2019. Caleb on Arthur's lap. Arthur smiling. Gail holding a candy cane. The last photo before the diagnosis, before the surgery, before the bills, before things are tight, before $228,000, before the kitchen floor and the weekend shifts and the $340 auto draft on the 15th. In this photo, nobody knows anything except that it's Christmas and the baby is on Grandpa's knee and the candy cane is peppermint and the tree behind them has lights that Ray strung because Ray strings the lights in every room she enters, literally and otherwise. I stood in the hallway looking at it for 2 minutes. Ray was in bed, not asleep. She heard me. She'd been the one who found the property records, actually. She looked up Nina's address before I did because Vanessa's comment bothered her, and she found the numbers and didn't know how to tell me, so she left the browser tab open on the laptop and waited for me to find it, which I did, which is how I discovered it at the kitchen table, and the discovery was Ray's before it was mine. And she carried it alone for a day before I opened the laptop and saw what she'd already seen. She came to the hallway. She saw me holding the Christmas frame. She didn't ask what I was doing. She said one thing. "Do you want me to drive?" I said no. She went back to bed. She left the porch light on for when I came home. I pulled the Christmas photo off the wall. The nail hole was visible. The wall behind the frame was a slightly different shade because the paint had faded around it over 3 years, but not under it. The outline of the frame was still on the wall, a rectangle of the original color surrounded by lighter paint, a ghost of where the family used to be. I put the frame in the box, face down, the image of my son on his grandfather's lap pointing down into the cardboard, looking at the bottom of a box instead of looking at me. The porch, 5:30 a.m. Wednesday. I chose the time because Arthur leaves for work at 6:15 and Gail volunteers at 9. I wanted the frames discovered, not delivered. There's a difference. Delivering means a conversation. Discovering means a reckoning that happens without me in the room, which is the only kind of reckoning I'm capable of because I am not a man who confronts. I am a man who returns things quietly and lets the return speak. And this is either strength or surrender, and I've spent 34 years not knowing the answer. The porch light had a motion sensor that was broken. I offered to fix it last year during a visit. Arthur said, "I'll get to it." He didn't. So the porch was dark. I carried the box up 3 steps and knelt on wood that creaked under my weight and placed them one at a time. The boards were cool under my palms. I could smell the neighbor's jasmine from the trellis 3 yards over. The same jasmine Gail once said, "Makes the whole street worth living on," which is a sentence about a $12 plant and a sentiment she never applied to a grandson whose surgery cost $18,800. Face down. Everyone. Not because face down is dramatic. Because face down means you have to pick them up to see who they are, and picking them up is a choice. And the choice to look at the faces requires the kind of effort this family has never made for me or for Caleb. Face up would be an accusation. Face down is a mirror. You decide whether to look. The Christmas photo went on top. Last frame. The image Arthur would see first when he turned it over was Caleb at 2, on his lap, 6 months before the surgery nobody funded. I placed it carefully. The glass didn't crack. I stood on the porch for a minute. The neighborhood was dark except for a street light at the end of the block and a porch light 2 houses down that worked because somebody fixed it. I could hear a sprinkler starting somewhere. The newspaper hadn't arrived. Part of me wanted to knock on the door and say the number and watch his face. Part of me wanted to take the frames back and hang them and pretend Vanessa never said anything at the barbecue. And a small part of me wanted Arthur to open the door and see me and say something that made the $228,000 make sense. Because if Arthur could explain it, then maybe I could go back to being the son who says, okay, and sits on floors and works weekends. And that version of me was easier to live inside, even if he was heavier. I drove home. Ray's porch light was on. Arthur found them at 7:15 a.m. Opened the front door for the newspaper. 11 frames. Stacked. Face down. No note. He stood in the doorway in slippers and a robe and went through them one at a time. Through Ray's friend, who heard from a neighbor who walks early, I learned that Arthur turned each frame over slowly. Christmas. Wedding. Retirement. Park. Easter. One by one. Each photo a face. Each face a person he paid nothing for standing next to a person he paid $228,000 for. He sat on the porch step after the last frame and stayed there for 20 minutes. And I don't know what he looked at during those 20 minutes, but the frames were beside him and the newspaper was behind the door and he chose to sit with the frames, which is more than he did in the waiting room. Gail called at 8:42 a.m. Voicemail. I found the pictures on the porch. I don't understand why you did this. We're your parents. You can't just return family. You can't return family. From the woman who returned my request for help with things are tight. I listened to the voicemail once. The sentence, you can't just return family, is the sentence of a woman who doesn't understand that the frames aren't family. They're evidence of a family that existed in photos and not in checks, in poses and not in payments, in smiles arranged for cameras and not in money arranged for surgeons. Nina called at 9:30. Quieter voicemail. Mom told me about the frames. I think I know why. Can we talk? She thinks she knows. She doesn't think. She knows. The daughter who received $228,000 watched the son who received $0 pay surgery bills alone, and she never offered a dollar. Not from the mortgage subsidy, not from her savings, not from the kitchen Arthur renovated with his supposedly bad back. I didn't return the calls. Not that day. Not that week. 2 weeks of silence. Arthur, 7 calls. Gail, 14. Nina, 3. The calls tapered the way everything in this family tapers when I don't respond, gradually, then completely, because my silence has always been interpreted as acceptance, and this time it meant something else, and they couldn't tell the difference. Day 8. Gail called the house phone. Ray answered. Gail said, why is he doing this? We're his parents. Ray said one number. $228,000. The line went quiet. Ray waited. Gail didn't respond. Ray hung up. She told me about it that night while I was folding Caleb's laundry, small shirts and small socks, and a hat he wears to cover the scar when the sun is bright. She said, I told her the number. I said, what did she say? Ray folded a sock. Nothing. She said nothing. The number did the work. 3 weeks after the frames. Arthur came to my door. No call first. Holding one frame. The Christmas photo. He said, I didn't know about the surgery money. Your mother handled it. She told me she helped. 10 words that cracked the story open like a skull that needed reshaping. Gail told Arthur she helped with the surgery. She didn't. She lied to Arthur, and she lied to me. Arthur thought the mortgage payments and the surgery help existed simultaneously. They didn't. I looked at the frame. I looked at Arthur. I didn't invite him in. I said, she didn't help. Arthur stood on my porch holding a photo of his grandson, and his face did something I'd only seen once before, at 3:14 a.m. in a NICU. And he held the frame the way he held the baby, carefully, like both might break, and neither of us said anything else, and he left holding the Christmas photo, and I closed the door and stood in the hallway where the ghost outline of the frame was still visible on the wall. The payment plan continues. $340. The 15th, $9,960 remaining. The auto draft doesn't know about the porch or the lie or the promise at 3:14 a.m. The hospital processes the draft. I watch it go. 29 more months of watching $340 leave an account that nobody helped fill, for a surgery nobody helped fund, for a boy nobody drove 12 minutes to sit with in a waiting room, while a television played a home renovation show with the sound off. Caleb pointed at the hallway wall yesterday. The nail hole. Where's Grandpa? I was in the kitchen. I could hear the question but couldn't see his face, which is either fortunate or unfortunate, depending on whether you think a father should see his son's expression when the son notices the grandfather is gone. I said, Grandpa has them now. Which is true. The sentence answers the question without answering it, which is the only language available when your 4-year-old asks where the man who held him at Christmas went, and the answer is $228,000, and a lie and a porch and a promise that never left a hospital room. There's one photo on the hallway wall now. Same nail. Same hole. Different frame. Caleb at the park, 2 weeks after the bandages came off. Running. Arms out. His scar catching the sunlight. Ray took it on her phone, and it's slightly blurry because Caleb was moving and Ray was crying, and cameras don't account for either. The Christmas photo is on Arthur's porch. This one is on my wall. Same nail. Different boy. The one on the porch is sitting on a lap that promised to take care of him. The one on the wall is running on legs that nobody helped pay for. Thanks for listening to this one. Means more than you know. Subscribe, comment, share. I'll be back.